Okay. We've all gathered here tonight to to talk about minimum maintenance roads, and I can't believe there's this many people that are interested in minimum maintenance roads. There you go. My name is Phil Street. I'm the Director of Planning at the Tug Hill Commission. And I was asked to come here and tell you everything I know about minimum maintenance roads, which isn't a whole lot, but I don't know if there's anybody that knows a whole lot more than I do. Actually, this is a pretty complicated subject, and it's difficult to wend its way through. I hope everybody's taken a handout, because I'm going to orient you to a lot of information that's in these handouts. Does everybody have handouts? It's really important to have those. Okay. Because this is such a difficult subject to understand, I've put a couple of definitions together, and there's a little handout I have that says definitions, and I wanted to go over this first because I get calls from people all the time and about this subject, and there's a lot of confusion about the meaning of seasonal roads versus the meaning of low volume roads versus the meaning of minimum maintenance roads. And so I wanted to clarify that first, because as I go through this, I'm going to be using those terms quite a bit, and they mean very, very different things. But frankly, when I hear the public talk about this issue, they confuse those words constantly. So just to clarify what those terms mean, the first thing on the list is seasonal road, okay? And our definition is it's an annual designation by the town highway superintendent, primarily to notify the public that a town road or road segment will not be maintained or plowed between December 1st and April 1st. And any legitimate request by a resident or business accessed by the road will require the removal of the designation. And then there's a sign below it. I put the seasonal use sign that's posted on it, which is a white rectangular sign. And the designation of that sign in the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices is NYR 8-10. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, there's a state manual. The state adopted the federal manual basically and added its own things to it, and seasonal use is one of the things they added to it. It's a this is the version of it that Cornell Local Roads program puts out, but you can go right online and get this. You'll see one of the handouts looks like this. It's got a lot of web links to it, and if you have access to the internet, you can get a lot of these materials and more than I've provided you with. If you look at the very bottom link, you'll see the NYSDOT New York supplement of the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. You can click on that and you can pull that up, and it's got all the signs that are required in New York State and how you use them. So the seasonal limited use highway has that particular sign attached to it. Now, the seasonal use, limited use highways is authorized through highway law in New York State. There's a section of New York State statutes called highway law, and section 205-a is the authority for towns to designate roads as seasonal limited use highways. And I want to make clear that this is an annual designation that the highway superintendent makes. And what the highway superintendent would do is make that designation annually and then notify the town board that they've done that, and then the town board would supply money to post the signs. And once the signs are posted, then the town is basically just making a statement to the public that we don't intend to maintain this piece of road until somebody makes us. And who can make the town do it is any resident on the road or anybody that creates a residence even during the winter or a business on that road. Okay, that's how the seasonal use section of the law works.
So, Bill, so if a resident is moved in on a seasonal use road on their own property, is it the town have the jurisdiction to say yes or no? Or if the resident says, I want you to plow from point A to point B, that is a town road, then that's as simple as that? Or is there some leeway that the town board can say, nope, we're a seasonal road in that section and that's it?
You would have to, if a residence is on that road and you haven't been plowing it, and the resident, say they even have a camp there,
Yeah.
and they say, we want this road open to our camp, the town's obligated to open it.
They are?
Yes.
At just a request?
Yes.
Is
Mhm.
that resident or?
Well, what's a resident?
Yeah, exactly.
We had a court case across the river here, and I can't remember which town it was, Gregg or Lionsdale. I can't remember which town it was. Is it?
It was Greg.
Okay, town of Gregg, and there was a seasonal camp there, but somebody wanted to go there in the winter and reside in that place, and the court ruled that even if they want to reside there for one day, you have to open the road to them. So basically, the seasonal use highway statute is basically making a statement that we don't plan to plow this until somebody tells us we have to plow it. That's really what it amounts to, and that's the highway superintendent's job.
Say a person, like we had a person we're meeting with tomorrow, walked up basically this week, got a building permit in the last week or so, and is going about half-mile beyond where we turn around now on a seasonal road.
Mm-hmm.
And plans on, I guess, building in there this fall or this winter.
Mm-hmm.
We gotta keep that road open.
Yeah, you would.
It's gonna be a business though.
It doesn't matter. Residence or business is the way the law reads. Mm-hmm.
The
Yep.
judge's ruling said if you wanted to be there 1 hour of one day, they have to plow it every day throughout the winter.
You don't happen to know fluently that number or where that information is with you?
Judge Gilbert is the one that did that, all I can tell you, and
But-
if they wanna be there 1 hour of one day, they have to plow it every day for the winter.
But there are a number of cases along the same lines. I mean, this is just one that's local, but I mean, you'll find that you're going to find that in every department in the state, I believe. I don't know there's any exceptions to that. Yeah. So the next thing I have on the list is the concept of low volume road. And a definition of a low volume road is a town road or road segment which has an average daily traffic count. ADT is what the abbreviation for that, of less than 400 vehicles per day. And that would include virtually every town road, I suppose, on Tug Hill or anywhere in this region. So that's just a generic definition of what a low volume road is. And then we have the concept of the minimum maintenance road. Minimum maintenance road is a road or road segment designated by local law with maintenance standards adopted by the town, which may include limitations on snow plowing, surface maintenance, roadside maintenance, bridges, and signage. And the designation is continued until the highway superintendent deems that the maintenance standards should be changed, or the town board removes the designation by local law. In other words, amending the original law that created it. The minimum maintenance concept is something that doesn't appear in highway law. It's something that municipalities are doing pursuant to municipal home rule law. So there's some question about whether this is upholdable or not in the long run. So far it has been, but we don't know for sure how long that may last. But there is legislation being proposed that would put it into highway law, and we're guardedly optimistic that will happen in the near future. But the minimum maintenance road is created by the local law, and you end up with posting the road with a yellow diamond that says minimum maintenance road. The New York State DOT manual for uniform traffic control devices designates it NYW 4-16. So obviously the New York State Department of Transportation has endorsed in some way the concept of the minimum maintenance road because they've provided a sign for it.
I feel like I
Yeah.
Like a low volume road.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how does that help us, low volume road?
I'll get to that. We'll use that term. So I just want you to know what that term means, okay? Okay. So I want to get into where does the minimum maintenance road concept come from? What happened was, and why? What happened was that back in the mid-1980s, there was a lot of concern about liability on roads, on town roads. There were low-volume roads because the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, which is AASHTO, okay, let me refer to it as AASHTO, promulgates, puts out standards for road construction. And they have a thick manual, it's about 2-3 inches thick, of standards for state highways and county highways and all your pretty much major roads. And there's a little chapter in there for local roads. Well, the local road standards that they put in there were far exceeding anything you'd see in a typical Tug Hill community. So there really essentially were no road standards that applied to the types of roads that we have as town roads. And that was the people were starting to get very concerned about this issue because of liability issues. If someone has an accident on a road, one of the things that people do, of course, is sue whoever's got the deep pockets, and the municipality has a deep pocket. And if an accident happens, you can say, well, we're blaming the road, and the road wasn't built to any standard. So the idea was that in order to prevent this kind of deep pocket in our municipalities, in our rural municipalities, the state was interested in creating some kind of a road standard that you could use for low-volume roads, the types of roads that we have. So the state created what was called the Local Roads Classification Task Force. And it was made up of a bunch of a whole variety of officials from around the state, DOT people, local people. There was a fellow from Martinsburg that was on it, and I can't remember your highway superintendent. Carl Morris was on that task force. But there's a variety of people that worked together to put together some kind of a road standard that would apply to low volume roads, less than 400 ADT roads. That task force morphed kind of over time into what's called the Local Roads Research and Coordination Council. And they, in 1992, promulgated their recommendations on what to do with standards for low-volume roads. And it's this document right here. This is the publication that was put out by the Legislative Commission on Rural Resources and the results of the work of the Local Roads Research and Coordination Council. This is the 2012 version of it. I haven't provided this to you because you don't really need to see what's in here. If you do want to see what's in here, this is if you're really into the weeds on minimum maintenance roads. It's on. You can download it off this list here. It would be the second one down. Guidelines for Rural Town and County Roads, Local Roads Research and Coordination Council Manual. But the reason you don't really need to see this manual is because everything that's important from the manual has been republished in this manual that was put out by the Cornell Local Roads Program. Highway Standards for Low-Volume Roads in New York State. Okay, everything that you really need to know is right in here. Okay. Well, the Local Roads Research and Coordination Council not only put together general standards for less than 400 ADT roads, they also added the provisions for minimum maintenance roads, which are roads less than 50 ADT. Okay, so when we're talking about minimum maintenance roads, we're talking about things that are less than 50 ADT. That would be the cutoff. You couldn't designate something busier than that as a minimum maintenance road. So the information published here established standards for both minimum maintenance roads and low volume roads, and established a process for creating minimum maintenance roads. Okay? And they recommended a model local law. Well, the model local law was put together by the Legislative Commission on Rural Resources, and it's included in this manual here. Okay? So if you look at the back of this manual, the whole second half of it essentially is the model local law you'd use to establish minimum maintenance roads. If you look at this document, starting on page 17, you'll see local law. Okay? That's the local law you'd use to start the ball rolling on creating a minimum maintenance road. Okay? And I'll get into some details on that local law in a minute. Now, it just so happens that AASHTO, the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, decided in 2001 that they were going to publish low-volume road standards. And they came up with this manual. Okay, this is the AASHTO standards. But these standards are difficult, if not impossible, for our local communities to use, because AASHTO represents the majority of local governments in the entire country. And in most states, highway superintendents, highway supervision is done by counties. And there are professional engineering staffs on board. And so these are designed to be implemented by professional engineers. It's not something that a local highway superintendent of ours would be able to deal with. The other problem with this set of standards is that it does not mention minimum maintenance roads. There's nothing in here about minimum maintenance roads. So Cornell Local Roads Program has recommended we stick with those standards that were promulgated by the local law promulgated by the Legislative Commission on Rural Resources, and what the local Local Roads Research and Coordination Council came up with. Okay, so that's why we're still recommending that you use those, because that's what the Cornell Local Roads Program is still recommending. Okay. So you may run across these, but they probably aren't going to do you much good. So now, the local law. Just to get into the weeds a little bit on this local law. The local law can be used by any town which is considered a rural town. And to be a rural town, you need to have 150 people per square mile or less. And I hate to say this, Ed, but Lee's doesn't follow that category. I think 2 of our towns in Tug Hill don't meet the criteria, and I think it's Lee and Hastings are the only 2 towns that don't. So theoretically, under the recommendations of the Local Roads Research and Coordination Council, those 2 communities probably couldn't do minimum maintenance roads. But what the local law does is, it's a process for the towns to adopt this local law. And what the local law does is it sets up a process to classify your roads as low-volume roads into the various low-volume road categories. And then it sets up a further process within this local law to establish minimum maintenance roads, which is a subset of low-volume roads. Okay? So it does 2 things. It authorizes your highway superintendent to start preparing maps of where your low-volume roads are, the different classifications, and sets up a process for you to go further and do minimum maintenance roads. If you look at the local law, the whole first part of it is the process for establishing minimum maintenance roads. But I want to get to page, if you look at this, you're looking at this manual here, page 22 is where I'd like to start with that. What the local law does is it authorizes the highway superintendent to categorize your town roads. Now, this does not count county roads or state roads. It authorizes your highway superintendent to categorize your town roads into 6 different types of low-volume roads. We've got the low-volume collector, the residential access, farm access, resource industrial access, agricultural land access, and recreation land access. Now you'll see that there's 2 agricultural type on the things on the list. There's the farm access and the agricultural land access. The difference between those is important. A farm access means a place where there is an actual farm center. You'd have a residence there and the barns and whatever. The recreational land access, or excuse me, the agricultural land access category would be a category where there's just fields. Because we have a lot of that around where there's just fields, okay? Now, the reason that that distinction is important, because if you look at the bottom bullet there, minimum maintenance road, minimum maintenance road is an overlay of 2 of those categories, the agricultural land access and the recreation land access. In other words, you have to have a road categorized as agricultural land access or recreational land access before you can further designate it as a minimum maintenance road. It has to be in one of those 2 categories. Okay? Now, in my experience in dealing with towns, there are almost no towns that come up with low-volume collector roads. Almost everything falls into the other categories. So what it says in the definition of minimum maintenance road here, it says a low-volume road or road segment which may be of a seasonal nature, have an average traffic volume of less than 50 vehicles per day, as I said, which principally or exclusively provides agricultural or recreational land access. So your first step in getting to a minimum maintenance road is to classify your roads as low-volume roads, and then come up with your agricultural land access and your recreational land access. And those 2 categories you can go to minimum maintenance roads with through a second local law. Okay? Everybody following that so far? It requires 2 local laws to get to a minimum maintenance road. If you look at page 23, there's a table 3 on page 23. And that lists the 6 categories of low-volume roads that you can designate. And it tells you what you need to do in order to get to those designations. So I find it very helpful if I'm categorizing roads with a town to put together a land use map first. Put together a map of the town that shows what the land uses are on each of the parcels, and you can easily do this by putting the assessor's categories on them. So you can look at any road segment and you know what's along the road, and it helps you a lot in figuring out what kind of a category you'd put the road in. But you also have to look at what the average daily trips are for each of these before you can categorize it, and what kind of rehabilitation design types you want to use. You look at that on the middle column there, you'll see the A, B, and C's there. Those are all the rehabilitation types. So you'd want to make sure that you can use one of the rehabilitation types that you'd like to use. If you look at page 24, table 4, you'll see each of the 3 types of rehabilitation types, type A, B, and C there, and it talks about what are the criteria the design criteria you'd have for each of those types of roads. So you pick a design type that you like for a road, and then you plug it into this chart on table 3, and that along with the average daily trips on the road, you figure out what kind of category you're in, and also depending on what the land use is along the road. Okay? Now, Table 6 is a key table, because Table 6 on page 26. This talks about what kind of maintenance activities you can do on a minimum maintenance road. Well, it's got a column for normal maintenance, and it's got a column for minimum maintenance. In your minimum maintenance column, for everything except blading, which says it would be infrequent, everything else in every category of maintenance, surface maintenance, roadside maintenance, and for bridges, everything is maintained in a manner determined by highway superintendent, consistent with the volume and type of traffic, and the manner stated in Section 7 of this local law. So basically, it's up to your highway superintendent to determine how to maintain the road. And if you look at the activities that are covered, it's crack sealing, patching and potholes, surface seals, thin overlays, snow removal, shoulder maintenance. And for roadside maintenance, cleaning, mowing, brush control, guardrail maintenance, drainage structures, ditches, slopes, and for bridges, cleaning, lubrication, painting, decking, and drainage. So it's basically anything you want to do on a minimum maintenance road. It's at the discretion of the highway superintendent if you designate it minimum maintenance. Okay? Then the rest of the local law is just defining what each of those maintenance regime, what each one of those maintenance objects is. Now, the first part of this local law is about the process to go to minimum maintenance roads. So the commission has put together many years ago, we put together a quick checklist of how to wend your way through this complex process. And you'll see a one-pager in here. It says procedure for implementation of low volume road designation. Okay? What this is the cliff notes for the local law. Okay? Yes, sir.
What did you say just now?
Oh, I just said this was the cliff notes. The cliff notes for the local law. This is the quick and easy way of understanding what's in the local law, because the local law has got a lot of detail and whatever. But if you want to understand basically what the process is, this is the easy checklist of the things you need to do to go through low volume road designation and then minimum maintenance road designation. Okay? The first thing you have to do is adopt that local law, the one I've just gone through. And that's item number 1. First, the town board would hold a public hearing on it, and then in number 2, the town board adopts the local law. Okay, that gets you through step 1. And the local law is pretty comprehensive, and there's virtually no reason to modify it. It's a model, but you can do what you want to modify it. But I'll tell you, of all the towns I know who have adopted that law, I don't know of any town which has modified it. Virtually everybody just takes that local law and plunks it down and adopts it, and it gives you the process and whatever. And it's a pretty good idea to go with the local law as much as possible, because it's based upon this, which is what we're hanging our hats on about the legality of it. Okay? Then step 3, your highway superintendent establishes the low volume road classifications, puts together how they'd like to see the roads classified into those 6 categories. And then step 4, the findings are filed with the town clerk, and a copy of the designation is presented to the town board members and the town clerk within 10 days of that filing. And then in step 5, the town board adopts a resolution accepting low volume road designations. So we've got a local law that's been adopted, and now we have a resolution accepting the highway superintendent's classification. Okay, those are the 2 things we have. And now you've got your roads classified into everything should be classified into one of those 6 categories. Now, as I said, 2 of those categories could be further designated minimum maintenance, and those are the recreation land access and the agricultural land access. Okay? you want to designate those, then you start with steps 6 through 13 here. Step 6, the highway superintendent submits recommendations to the town board on roads that should be designated minimum maintenance. And 7, the town board prepares findings and files them with the town clerk, and then sends them out to the Board of Education of the school district, the town planning board, the county planning board, and the general public for comment at least 60 days before the hearing. And then you have to have a public hearing on it. The planning board, the planning boards, both the county and the town, and the school board need to get back to the town within 45 days, or presumably you can move without their recommendations. Okay, in step 9, the town board notifies any property owners adjacent to the proposed minimum maintenance road by certified mail at least 10 days before the hearing. So there's a fairly extensive notification process here. Then in step 10, the town board holds a public hearing on the proposed minimum maintenance road. And 11, the town board accepts in part or rejects the recommendations of the school board or the planning board on the proposed minimum maintenance road. And 12, the town board takes action on proposed minimum maintenance road designation by local law. And then you post the road with the yellow diamond that I showed you on this handout. Once it's posted, then that's a minimum maintenance road. Theoretically, until the town board revises the law. That's the process you use. Okay? Any questions on that? It's fairly complicated, I know.
So I'll go back to the same question I had earlier then. Let's say the town has adopted all of this to a minimum maintenance road, and then somebody has a camp or something at the end of that road, and they want to access that road, that property in the wintertime. There's a cabin back there.
Yeah.
Not just vacant land.
The way the towns have been using the minimum maintenance road law, now there again, we don't know if it will be ultimately upholdable or not, but so far it has been. The way the towns have been using the law is once we've designated it, any subsequent building on the road or request from that point on is we don't need to open the road.
And what if there's a structure there already?
Same thing. Don't have to open the road if no one, once we've notified everyone, nobody's making a complaint about it, then the towns consider that to be a minimum maintenance road. It's up to the highway superintendent's discretion, basically, whether they want to plow or not. That's the theory behind it. And so far, it's been upheld. It's been in court quite a bit. But so far, our towns have won. But that's the theory behind it. But we would like to see a statute which says that this can be done in highway law.
Has it been passed by the Senate and now it's just gone to the Assembly?
It's always been passed by the Senate. It's the problem with the laws. This has been going on for 10, 15 years, where it's been passed through the Senate, and it's been held up by the Assembly Transportation Committee. It's never gotten out of the Transportation Committee.
Will it be going up again before the end of the year?
Yep. As far as I know, we're very hopeful. There's been changes in the Assembly Transportation Committee, and we're hopeful that the committee now will look more favorably upon this.
Yeah.
We don't really see any reason for there to be any opposition. I mean, years ago, when this proposal was first when this was first floated, many years ago, when 15 years ago, when it first was floated, the trial lawyers were opposed to it, and that's why it never got out of the Assembly. It was because trial lawyers like lawsuits, and they didn't want anything that limited liability, so they were fairly opposed to the concept of classifying and designating standards for roads. But then they dropped their opposition to it, and they're no longer opposed to it, as far as we can tell. So there really is almost nobody that's opposed to it. It's
Just got to get a plan from it to be
It's got to get out of Transportation Committee is what it's got to happen. Yep.
So,
Yep.
use Ben's example. They have a minimal use already identified road, been there for a long time. The guy owned the land for a long time, decides to put a cabin up. And then the cabin, for hunting and whatnot, turns into, well, my son's big, he's grown up, he wants to live there, or something. So you got a family moving in. Now they want either a bus go down the road, they want the plow to go down the road. An issue, not in my town, but other towns, you hear horror stories about the expense. Whatever that town's highway superintendent, that road needs to be to that person's specifications, whether they'll allow a bus or a snowplow, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the tab, to pay for that,
Yeah.
explain that one.
Okay. The data that we have says it costs something in the neighborhood of $100,000 a mile to build a road that's plowable, or to convert one of these minimum maintenance roads into a plowable road. And somewhere is around $8,000 a mile to plow it annually. So you're talking significant money. That's why our towns, the minimum maintenance road concept is really one of the big bases of it is to provide standards for your road. So if you're sued, you've got your roads built to a standard. But the major reason our towns use a minimum maintenance road concept is because they don't want to have to plow these roads. And the seasonal road classification, as we just talked about, is pretty much worthless for that. So that's, there's a lot of money at stake here, a lot of money at stake. We have something like, we've mapped out all the minimum maintenance roads that we know about at the commission. We've mapped them all out on a map of Tug Hill and identified how many miles we're talking about here. And we think that there is something in the neighborhood of 158 miles of minimum maintenance roads right now. And I know of probably about a half a dozen towns who, if there was a state statute that authorized it through highway law, they'd jump on it too and do it. And so we're talking about a lot of miles of road here. We have something like in Tug Hill 150 miles of seasonal roads. We've never mapped them, but in just looking at them, I'm thinking there's about as many miles of seasonal roads as there are minimum maintenance roads. So if all those seasonal roads became minimum maintenance roads, which they probably should be, you'd be talking close to 300 miles of roads in Tug Hill that would fall in this type of a situation. And when you look at the fact that many of our roads serve winter recreational purposes, I mean, many of our minimum maintenance roads and seasonal roads that are out there are snowmobile trails in the winter. They're important habitat areas. They're deeply in the woods in most cases. Many of these roads can't even be widened because they have state land on both sides. The state owns basically the land under it, so there's no way to widen the road, and there's no way to create a plowable road out of it. And that's a situation we run into in many communities is, if somebody comes along and says they need a road plowed, there's actually no physical way to do that without putting a blower in there or something. So it creates a huge dilemma for our communities. And I think to some extent we're a unique area in New York having these problems. But there are other areas of the state that have quite a bit of concern about minimum maintenance roads, like the southern tier, for instance. One of the things that I've recommended is, and you'll find this in the publication here, you see one of these that says, protecting town roads from snow plowing demands. I'd like to run through with that the things that I think you can do to create your best defense towards having someone want you to open one of these roads. And there are 7 different items that I've identified as things that you probably should do if you're a town and you've got these kinds of issues. And the first thing I have on that list is, first of all, to identify what your town roads are. In most of the towns that I've worked with, virtually all but a couple of the towns I've worked with, the towns aren't really sure what the town road system is. And they know what they've identified on their CHIPS list as their highway system. But there's always a lot of roads on Tug Hill which have been abandoned over the years. And there might not be good documentation of what's been abandoned and what hasn't. So there's a lot of dispute over whether something's a town road or not. In fact, I would gather that the vast majority, I mean the very vast majority of conflicts between town boards and property owners over roads is the conflict over, is that really a town road or not, or has it been abandoned in the past? So one of my first positions on trying to wend your way through all this is to try to accurately map what your town road system is. And the CHIPS list is a good start, but we found a lot of errors on the CHIPS list, and errors creep into the CHIPS list pretty easily because it's not a map, it's a file of, it's like a PDF, or it's like an Excel file or something of that nature. It's a matrix. So you go down through it every year and look at it. You say, yep, that's a town road. Yep, that's a town road. But you see what should be taken off it, but you don't see what should be added. And a lot of towns miss roads or forget about them. If you want to see your CHIPS list, I've got it on this. If you look at the two that are just above the last one on the list, you'll see NYSDOT local highway inventory, and that's in two places on the internet. It's both a PDF and an Excel spreadsheet if you go different places. The engineering section has an Excel spreadsheet, but it's easier to look at the PDF file. But you can go right in there, you click on your county, and then it's got all the towns in there. You'll just get in towns and villages, you go down through and you can find your town. It's alphabetical, and it's got the list of all the roads in your town and what you're claiming for CHIPS money. Okay? That should be accurate, but it's always good to have extra eyes on those just to make sure. But that's a great place to start. But the problem with the CHIPS list, or what you're claiming for highway credit, is that you'll have roads out there that probably aren't the abandonment of them is not documented. And so property owners start thinking, well, this is a town road, and even though you haven't been claiming CHIPS money for it, I have the right to build on it, and you have to plow it for me. So be careful about that. The reason that this pops up like this is, the reason it becomes a problem is because almost all town roads are what are called highways by prescription. And what that means is the public has the right to travel back and forth over a piece of property. If it's been used for 10 years as a highway, it becomes a highway. Okay, it's not like the town's ever gone out and surveyed it and bought it. It's never been laid out by the highway superintendent. It just became a road because people traveled on it. Now, it used to be 20 years, then they dropped it to 15. Now it's 10 years. You travel back and forth over something and use it as a public road for 10 years, it becomes a public road. But it's still people's property. They own to the center of it if you're going down a property line. Well, because that's how you create a town road, that's how you get rid of a town road, too. It becomes not a town road by people not using it. Okay, once people stop using it, then it disappears. It doesn't take any kind of official action of the town. If the public stops traveling back and forth over a piece of property for 6 years, then it stops being a highway. Ed?
For example, some of the old fire lanes, I know you got a lot of them up in Sudan, all the towns have got them someplace. And there's always been that question, or is this going to be a right of way to a camp or what? But a lot of the roads, they go just to connect on another trail or road, but they're not maintained by the DEC. Nothing is being done. However, there's that potential of some of the landowners, the lots back in there, get sold and somebody builds something. So then the town's going to get stuck taking care of the road. But if you went and did a qualified abandonment of that, now it makes a lot of people happy.
Yeah.
Because they can work it amongst themselves, town's right out of it, and their land's gonna be right dead center. If it's one rod road, dead center. 8
Yeah.
foot, you know?
You're absolutely correct on that. The best thing to do in a case like that, where you think it's a town road, but you don't want to maintain it as a town road, is to do a qualified abandonment on it. A qualified abandonment allows the right-of-way still to remain. It's just not part of your highway system. In other words, the public can still travel on it, but you don't have to maintain it as a town highway. So, but the problem with doing a qualified abandonment is you have to have less than 2 vehicles a day using it. You kind of got to demonstrate that. And also, it's something that's done by the county highway superintendent. It's not something you can do locally. It takes the county to do a qualified abandonment. So you got to talk to the county about it. But I think we have a lot of roads that probably should be qualified abandoned. Get them, the public still wants to use them, but you don't want them on your, list of things you got to maintain. So.
Well, how do the public use it if it's qualified abandonment? Because both property owners, so if you own both sides, it's yours. But let's say Ben lived on one, he was on one side of the old trail, or had land, I had land on the other side. Now because it's qualified abandoned, the property line automatically is going to revert back to the center or whatever that road distance, probably 8 foot.
Well, the property line's always been in the center. If you look at your deed, it's always been in the center.
Right, so
But what happened?
It's his land and mine now. We could.
You can't block it off. If it's qualified abandoned, the law says that you cannot block the road. You can put a gate in, but you have to leave the gate open, so the people. Yeah, you can't lock it. Yeah. 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 So it's still a public easement. The public still has the right to travel. You can't block that, but it's not part of your highway system anymore. Yeah, that's the difference. Mm-hmm. And that's what you really want to do with a lot of these roads, actually, is qualified abandonment while you still can. But that's the problem with the status of these roads, is that they were abandoned. They were probably wholly abandoned, a lot of them. The 6 years, they were never used for highway purposes. Everybody considered it abandoned. Nobody thought anything about it, but nobody recorded it. Or it was recorded in the town minutes at some time, but it got lost. I mean, some fire came and burned the record up, or it was so long ago that nobody can find it. So the idea, one of the ideas, is to try to reestablish what the road system is. And one of the things we've worked with towns on doing, and you might try doing this, is we work with towns on putting together what's called an official map. You put together an official map of the town and say, this is what we consider our highway system. And you file that as a certificate of abandonment of everything not shown on it. So instead of trying to find every segment of road that was once a town road or somebody thought was a town road or whatever, you just say, we're just wholesaling going to consider this map a certificate of abandonment for everything that's not shown on it. Then the way the law works is that people have 1 year to protest that, and if nobody protests it over the course of a year, then you've got a pretty good idea of what your town road system is. We've worked with all of our towns, almost all of our towns on the Hill, put together an official map. So the important thing for the towns is make sure you file that as a certificate of abandonment. Then that gets the statute of limitations going on anybody protesting. So that's the first step. Step number one is to figure out what your road system is, and as much as you can, try to abandon everything that's clearly abandoned in some way or other. The stuff that's questionable, or qualified to abandon it, or do something to deal with all these roads that are questionable. The second thing you want to do is you want to do your low volume road designations, like we already talked about. You adopt that local law and have your highway superintendent classify the roads into 6 categories and set yourself up to be able to do minimum maintenance roads. And the third thing you want to do is, if you have a comprehensive plan in your town, is talk about this stuff in your comprehensive plan. In other words, set yourself up to be able to have a regulatory program that you can create some kind of regulations and is justifiable by what you're putting in your comprehensive plan. So have stuff in your comprehensive plan that talks about, you know, the fiscal impacts of roads and the habitat areas you want to protect and the trail use of seasonal roads and this type of thing. You know, explain in your comprehensive plan why you might want to create minimum maintenance roads or keep these roads from being plowed. Okay? Then you've got your regulatory program. Step 4 would be designate your minimum maintenance road, you know, adopt your minimum maintenance road law and classify roads that you want to be minimum maintenance, you know, as minimum maintenance, and put the yellow signs up, as we just discussed. Then number 5, one of the things we've been recommending is that towns think about creating what we call like camp zoning, seasonal use zoning. The idea here is that the minimum maintenance designation only really controls the roadbed, but zoning controls the land adjacent to the road. So you want to get at that too. And in the law, let's see, in this publication here, if you look at the appendix, you'll see Appendix A is a model seasonal use classification provision. And I recommend any town that has minimum maintenance roads adopt something like this. This is something that first came from the town of Pinckney. We used this in the town of Pinckney, where we actually say that under the zoning law, we have a classification of a use which is a seasonal use, and that's the only kind of use we'll permit on a minimum maintenance road. In other words, you zone the minimum maintenance roads so that you can only put seasonal uses on them. And we define a seasonal use in the zoning law as a use which will not have access to a snow-plowed or winter-maintained public road or be provided with vehicular public services such as, but not limited to, emergency services, school busing, or postal delivery during the winter snow season. We've been advised many times that this is probably one of the stronger ways of dealing with these types of roads, is to have, you have more strength maybe through a zoning law than you do through the minimum maintenance concept. So, yeah, Ed?
Just a question on this. If you've already adopted your minimum maintenance law, can you add this into it after?
Yeah, you'd want to add this to your zoning law, not your minimum maintenance road law.
Yeah.
This is a zoning tool, which is really strong. Zoning tools are enormously powerful. They're more powerful probably than the minimum maintenance concept. So what you do is you classify the land along minimum maintenance roads and say you can only put seasonal uses there. Now, this has a hole in it. The hole in it is that you've got a lot of uses already there that are going to be grandfathered. But at least it keeps the problem from getting worse.
But you can't regulate, all right, say you got minimum maintenance road and you got state land on each side of it, you can't regulate their land.
No,
You can't zone their land.
that's right. But that's not going to be built on or developed either. If you got reforestation or parkland or something like that, it's, you know, they're not going to put something on there. I mean, so it doesn't matter really. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Now, when you have a town meeting and 3/4 of the landowners on the strip of road you want minimal maintenance, they all reject it. What's the chance of doing it?
Well, that depends on your town. That depends on your town board and how adamant they are about it. But if the public knows that it's cost $100,000 a mile to put access in there and $8,000 a year to plow it per mile, then, you know, I know there's local politics, and, you know, who knows whether this concept works in every instance. But it certainly works in some instances because the town of Pinckney adopted this. You know.
Town of Lewis, he's one of our halfway through the process towns.
All right, a couple of them. Yep.
In other words, what you're saying is the town board can rule whatever they want.
Well, certainly they can. I mean, they might not be reelected, but they, but they can.
Still, it's done.
Yeah.
And you save the time.
Yeah. So this is a zoning tool you can use, and as I suggest, this is a powerful tool. And when we went around to talk to legislators about the minimum maintenance road concept, one of the first things that we were asked is, well, what are the towns doing with their zoning laws to keep this from getting worse or from happening? And we said, well, frankly, our towns aren't doing anything through zoning. So we said we better get our towns doing something through zoning if we want to have this minimum maintenance concept accepted. So.
Okay, another question. Okay, as you know, we're still in litigation. We went through this year, the two ones, the one we appealed, we won. Now the two again, they won. So we're in the second appeal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If we're in litigation, can you do this zoning on the road that we're in litigation with?
Okay, there's two answers to that. Can you do this? Yes. And would it apply to any property? Yes, because any decision on zoning is based upon the date that it goes into effect. So any date that the zoning would go into effect, it's in effect from, you know. In other words, if someone sued you for passing this law, well, basically they couldn't, is what I'm really saying. The problem you have, though, is because you're in litigation, that means that there's an actual use already there, and it's grandfathered. That's your problem. Not that this law is not your problem. It's the fact that your use would be a prior existing non-conforming use under this law. You see what I mean? That's your problem. But this law would still apply to everything else. Yeah.
Date forward.
Yeah.
But what happened from this date back is still in litigation.
Yeah. And because that use is already there, the one that you're in litigation with, because that use is already there, it's gonna have a certain constitutional protections that other uses wouldn't have, because there's an investment there, and yeah. You have the problem with zoning always of non-conforming uses, which are things that were there before the zoning went into effect. Yeah. All right. The next.
So towns like Steuben, we have no formal zoning, but we have ordinances. Mobile home ordinances, junkyard ordinances, building maintenance code type ordinances and stuff like that. So what would be the benefit or not the benefit to go to the next step of zoning? We just updated our comprehensive plan. We found a lot of mistakes in the old one with roads, identification of roads and different things like that. So now we've been asked to put together a committee to look into the next step zoning in the town. So, and I think it applies to this and maybe everything in town. But what would be the benefit or the disadvantage to going to the next step of zoning versus our current status? We have no formal zoning, but we have ordinances. We have no zoning.
Yeah, it all depends on what you want to do. I mean, if you want to do things beyond what your local laws are doing right now, you might need to have a zoning law. I don't know what you'd want to do, Ben. I mean, zoning's a powerful tool. It's very powerful. You can do a lot of things in zoning that you can't do through separate local laws of some type. You know what I'm saying? It all depends on what you want to do. Whether, I mean, I don't know how to answer your question.
I know.
Yeah.
So, but as far as the roads, like we have in the town, we have abandoned roads in town. I guess I got to do some research to find out what type of abandonment, whether it's qualified abandonment or.
It's not easy to figure that out.
And that information is probably in the possession of the town clerk.
It's supposed to be filed with the town clerk.
Okay. We have a list.
Yeah, there's supposed to be. If there is a qualified abandonment done, that's supposed to be filed with the town clerk. if there's a wholesale abandonment that's been approved by the town board, that should be filed with the town clerk. That doesn't necessarily mean that a road isn't abandoned, though. It's just that you can create a record of the abandonment through filing it. The qualified abandonment, though, I would think should also appear somewhere in the county, because the county highway superintendent is responsible for doing it, and I think there should be a record in the county of what your qualified abandonments are. And Oneida County, I would suspect, is in pretty good shape on that, but I don't know for sure. I know some of the counties, like Lewis County, there was a courthouse fire, and a lot of those records were lost, and there's really not any way to know from the county what was done with the qualified abandonments before that fire. And I understand a lot of records like that were lost. But I think the Public Works Department in Oneida County would probably have a pretty good handle on what was done. And to my knowledge, they do. But you'd have to check with them. But the other alternative is to just go back through your town records, and like Les says, right, you have a road book or you have some kind of records. Yeah. Yep.
So if we adopted zoning, will that give us more strength with what roads have been abandoned going forward now?
I would think so, yeah. I mean, I don't know. You've got a building law, and it's almost kind of akin to a zoning law, and I don't really know what the status of it is, but it would certainly give a lot more strength to that. Yeah.
Yep. We've got, like a lot of rural towns, we've got Christmas and Associates is coming in and buying up large tracts of land, and they're using old abandoned roads, and they're subdividing everything into 20-acre lots on abandoned roads.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden we're getting people coming into the town hall asking for building permits, and they basically want the town to take the road back. And it's like, okay, where do we go with that? You following me?
Yeah. I mean, the town's position you got to assert is to say, well, it's not our road. Prove that it is.
Right.
You know?
So this goes back to this road thing. So we have an ordinance in town that says you cannot build on a piece of property if it has less than 175 feet of road frontage on a town maintained or municipality maintained road, whether it's town, county, or state. So in the meantime, we've had Christmas come in, take an old abandoned road that we consider old abandoned. I can honestly say we haven't checked into that classification officially. And they came in and they subdivided off of that old abandoned road their 175 feet. Every 175, another lot. 175, another lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, how do they figure they can subdivide off an old abandoned road and call that 175 foot minimum lot?
That is something you'd have to address through a zoning law, really. I mean, you really need the strength of a zoning law to deal with that, in my opinion.
What if they brought that road up to standard and turned it over to the town? Could they do
Well,
that?
sure they could. I mean, if you had a local law, a subdivision law, basically, you could put road standards into that and say you have to build to these particular standards before we'll approve your subdivision plat. So that's what you really need. You need a subdivision law. And the subdivision law actually the subdivision law could track to your building law without having a zoning law. But the main purposes of having a subdivision law is so that when a road's built, it's built to your town standards. So you could require them to build that road to whatever standards you have before you'd approve the subdivision, before you'd approve that plat. Now, it doesn't have to be dedicated to the town. It can still be kept a private road. There's no requirement that you can't force a developer to dedicate a road to the town. But you can require it be built to town standards.
It had to be maintained by the municipality, right?
Well, they're saying that, but I mean, the municipality's position is going to be, it's a private road.
Yeah, there's a problem here because
It's a private road.
in order to obtain a building permit from the town of Steuben, you need minimum acre and a half, which is all 20 acres.
Yeah, and you said built on a public road, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know how legal that is.
Yeah, so, and then Christmas came in, bought bought this great big tract of land like this glass tabletop here, and this is all, here's this so-called abandoned road that goes up to state land. It's an access to state land, and they chopped it off every 175 feet, lot, 175 feet, lot, right down through on this New York State DEC access road, which 50 years ago was a town road. And now all of a sudden we're faced with, now Christmas has sold all these lots. Now these people that bought all these lots on this road are coming to the town saying, hey, I bought this land, I want a building permit. Well, wait a minute. And so now we're caught because we're not the bad guy, but you bought land.
How are you caught if you already have a rule that that's not a maintained road that they built on? You should be covered. You know what I mean? Is it something, shouldn't it be covered? Because they've already have it identified.
And they're coming in because they got tax bills saying they're paying town, county, school taxes, highway taxes. They got their tax bill.
Isn't there something that's in legislation somewhere that I read that you can't abandon a road that goes to state or county reforestation areas like that?
There's a special abandonment provision for that. There's a qualified abandonment provision that allows you to abandon roads to the state for DEC administrative roads. You can take a town road and say this is abandoned to the state. And there again, that's a qualified abandonment, and you'd have to go probably, presumably, to the county highway superintendent to do it. But you can take a town road and take it off your inventory and turn it over to the state for their administrative purposes, and it's no longer a town road. And that may be what happened with that road there.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, may be what happened to it. There's a fellow over here that.
I remember, I'm from the town of Bend, obviously, so when the question that Ben was bringing up, you were talking to us about it, and we were trying to decide, just like you said, zoning and also subdivision came up, and I think you stressed to us to concentrate on the subdivision, where
It might be the thing you most need.
because since Christmas Associates owns that, you can make that subdivision like an HOA. And then
You could. You can require a homeowners association.
be responsible for maintaining
Yes.
the road according to New York State
Yep. You could do that. You can require it to be maintained by a homeowners association. Yeah. There's a lot of mechanisms. There's a lot of things you could explore. But I mean, I think if I were you guys, I'd be looking at a subdivision law. Yeah, because that's your threat. It's not so much a zoning issue as it is you've got road issues, and that's a subdivision issue. Yeah.
And so now, do we have the right? Does the town board or the town supervisor have the right now that they're all in, they're done, they're deeded, they're surveyed, it's done. The barn doors, cows are out of the barn. Now we've got this subdivision in our town, it's all done, and people own them. Now you have deed holders, taxpayers, and now how can we, I'm looking at this both ways, but do we have the right to deny them a building permit once these people bought this property in good faith, even if it isn't a town road? They want to put their seasonal cabins, hunting cabins, because right now we don't have anybody looking for residents, but you know how this works. This generation we're in, this is a hunting cabin. Well, then
Yeah.
little Johnny grows up and says, I want to move up there, and they
Yeah.
throw some insulation in this thing.
Yep. That's happened all over. Yeah.
How do
You know, yeah.
we have one of those situations right now in
Yep.
town. How do we
I
mitigate that?
I think.
How do we deny building permits?
Well, you said it. The barn door's closed and the horse is out. I think you just have to bite the bullet on that one. Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't think that one. You got to pick your battles, I think, Ben.
And I called this,
but you can probably keep that from getting worse. You know, there's a lot you could do to keep that from getting worse.
Well, if they adopted an official road map, and it isn't on the official road map for the town, then it shouldn't be a town road.
No, it probably isn't a town. I don't know. It may or may not. Who knows what the truth there is? But the town's position probably would or should be. We don't consider it a town road. It's a private easement of access.
to the state land.
Yeah, it's it's probably well, we know it's at least a private easement of access because there was a road there before, and so there's still the right for the people to access that through a private easement, even if the road was abandoned, there'd still be a private easement there, even though it's not a public easement. You know what I'm saying? More than likely, So the people would have the right to go back there and do their building or whatever. The problem is, under Section 280A of town law, you've got this provision of law which says you've got to be able to get emergency vehicles to things that are being built. So if the road's not built to town road standards or some kind of a standard that's acceptable to the town board in your case, you can actually deny a permit for those purposes. I mean, if you can't get emergency vehicles to those structures, then you can deny a permit. There's that angle to it too.
And that can be used
Yeah.
back onto the.
Look
get
at
the fire chief to come out and say, I'm not going to put a $200,000
Yeah.
fire truck up here.
well, it's up
Can we
to
use that?
it's up to you, your town board, to make a determination about whether there's suitable access to these in order to issue permits. And so I would look at Town Law Section 280-a.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a provisional law that's going to govern here, and how you interpret that. You might want to sit down with your town attorney and look at that. Yeah.
And then I don't understand.
Okay.
Then you got those people coming in with their tax bills and going, I'm paying for.
Yeah. Well, there's the political end of it too, and there's the public relations part of it. I know. Yep. The other thing we've got in Appendix B is a model driveway installation law, which you might want to look at too. The reason we're recommending this is it actually controls access from the road to the property. So you can set some kind of a standard in your driveway permit that says you can get this driveway access permit as long as you're not accessing onto a minimum maintenance road. And the reason we put this together, or the reason I think this is important, is because you have some lots that have access to more than one road. There are a lot of instances where you have some kind of a corner lot or some kind of a lot that's got two roads near it. One's a minimum maintenance road and one's not. Well, you wouldn't want to prohibit a structure if they could access onto a road that's already plowed. So what this would do is prohibit an access onto a minimum maintenance road if you put something like this together. So we're suggesting, well, this is another piece of that puzzle. You put as many of these pieces together as you can. So you might want to read through that. If you look at Section 5 of that, 5B, no driveway installation permit shall be issued for any use on a minimum maintenance road as established by local law, whatever it is, unless it is classified as a seasonal use pursuant to the town of whatever it is zoning law. So that's one more piece of that puzzle. And then the final thing that I recommend you do is you take a good look at your subdivision controls, or get them if you don't have them, so that new roads that are being created are built to some kind of a standard, even though you can't be forced to take those over. For public, I envision someday down the road where you've got a lot of these subdivisions in town where you've got taxpayers on these roads, and they're going to be coming to the town board saying, we're paying taxes on this, we want you to maintain our road just like you do everybody else's road. And it's going to be hard for the town to say no. And maybe some of these roads are going to become town roads. So you want to make sure that they're built and designed and built to some kind of a standard that allow you to plow them if they ever do become a town road.
We've had that already. I mean, we've done that before.
Mm-hmm.
Some subdivisions.
Yeah. There's always a danger whenever you have a new road created that it's going to end up a public road. I mean, you have a lot of these subdivisions that occur where you'll have a road that runs through the subdivision, and you'll have each lot owner responsible for maintaining a piece of that road. I see that all the time. Okay, but what happens Which you know, maybe that works for a few years, but what happens when one of the lots is in foreclosure or another one's in probate, or you know, the owner of this one over here, the guy lives in Florida and you never see him, and you know, and it's the obligation of the property owners to sue each other. You know, well, you can't even find the person to sue maybe in the future. You know what I'm saying? Or there's some entity that you can't basically get. It's like bleeding a rock when you're trying to get some bank that owns something in foreclosure to do something with the road. You know what I mean? So I envision that a lot of these situations, they're either going to become little slums in the future, or the town's going to end up taking over the road and maintaining and plowing it and whatever. So you got to be careful about what's happening in these kinds of situations. That they might look like they're okay today, but think about the future. What's going to happen 20 years from now in that situation? And homeowners associations are an option. You can require them, but they're really unpopular, and the towns don't like don't like getting involved in those types of things, requiring them and whatever. So that's my 2 cents. There's a lot of stuff here on this paper here you can have access to and download or whatever. We're gonna. I know these are all links here that are going to be hard to type into. We're going to try to post this on the Commission's website so that you can take this and you can just click into it and get all these documents. So it's a lot easier for you. So just keep an eye on our website, and we'll post this on there so you can hot link to it. Any other questions?
Yeah, and after the 9th week from now, when you depart, unfortunately, who is going to be our go-between expert in your field?
Matt Johnson is going to be our Director of Planning, and we have Elena Mallet. This is a good opportunity to introduce Elena. Elena is our new planner on the staff, and she's going to be taking over for Matt. so
It's going to be available for some private consultation.
Anything that I do, these guys will do. So.
You're gonna have to get out your checkbook.
But I hope, I know everybody had to pay $10 to get in here, so I wanted to have a lot of handouts for you so that you could get your $10 worth. I hope that you felt it was worth it. So, if there's no more questions, we'll wrap it up there. My last day will be January 8th. It's the last pay period in January. So.
Just a couple of questions.
Okay.
Minimal maintenance.
Yeah.
If a road is deemed minimal maintenance, does it affect anything with CHIPS funding?
No.
It has no bearing?
No bearing whatsoever on what, because it's still part of your highway system.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Just like your seasonal road. You know, you could classify a road as a seasonal road. It doesn't affect it.
Like the double, so we don't want those.
Yeah. Mhm.
The other question, minimal maintenance, are you still responsible to put signage on stop ahead signs, stop signs? I know that's one of the things on your maintenance activities it didn't cover at the bottom.
I don't know what the answer to that is.
You just don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I assume that I think you can assume that any kind of safety signs that you would need anywhere else in the town, it would probably be best to put them on a minimum maintenance road. Yeah, you definitely have to have the triangle minimum maintenance road sign, because it's not one until you post that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would suggest that it's probably a good idea, even. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Can subdivision laws be implemented on subdivisions that already exist?
It depends on how much of the subdivision has been built out. If the subdivision is less than 20%, let me think. If the subdivision is more than 20% built out, then you can't. You're stuck with what's there. But if it's been undeveloped, you can nullify it. It's difficult to do that if the lots have been sold. You know what I'm saying? Once individual deeds have been filed in the county clerk's office, it's almost impossible to undo a subdivision. But say you have a subdivision that's been platted, and I've seen this happen. We had one up in Turin that was platted back in the '60s, and they never sold any of the lots. The subdivision was filed in the county clerk's office, but no lots were ever sold. Well, the town required them to redesign some of it, because actually they required them to redesign the road because it was too steep. So yeah, in some cases, it all depends on the specifics of the case, but in some cases, yeah, you can have a subdivision that's already there redesigned and have the applicant refile it. Yeah.
But now that, to go one step further, now that they've all been sold, divided, Christmas is out. Now each one of them lots has their own deeded owner, recorded at the county clerk's office. You're one generation away from the subdivision.
Yeah, you're not undoing that.
So now the subdivision law is not gonna help that.
No, I think
problem.
you're not going to undo that.
And if he has sold all of the lots, if Christmas is no longer owning any of that
None.
land, he is no longer responsible for this head of household ruling either. So you'd have to have a constable, I think, to enforce or I don't know about a constable, but you'd have to appoint somebody to be head of household, correct? Or not head of household, but homeowners association.
I don't know how you can't really set one up in that case. I mean,
Once he's out, once he's sold all the land, he is no longer, because in our town, he tried to persuade us by hanging on to a lot, I believe, something like that, and them, because we didn't have any way of enforcing any of the laws. I think that was like trying to get us to favor, adopting the subdivision that he wanted to propose. Was because if he stays in, then he's responsible for, I believe, the homeowners association. He's got some connection to it still, is what I believe. No?
I'm not sure about that either. I think once you start selling lots, I don't think you can undo those. You might be able to set up a homeowners association for the lots that are unsold, but I don't know about the status of lots that have already been sold, because that's part of the agreement of the sale, is that you're a member of this. Part of the we like this restrictive covenants on a property. I mean, you.
And if there ain't one.
Yeah, if that doesn't exist when the lot's sold, I don't know how I don't think you can rope someone back into that. I doubt if you could. Yeah.
We had one where a subdivision had a single owner to start with. He put in deed restrictions. Then halfway through, he sold half the lots. Homeowners built there. They had these deed restrictions. Then he turned around and sold the other half of the subdivision to another developer who dropped the deed restrictions on that half.
Mm-hmm.
The people over here were coming back to us and saying we would have to go and try to enforce these deed restrictions.
No.
We said no.
No, the town's not a party to the deed restrictions.
We didn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah, the deed restrictions. This is something a lot of people don't quite understand. Is that deed restrictions are agreements between the buyer and the seller, and the town has no right to enforce those. I mean, a lot of times you'll see subdividers put that language into their covenants that the town can enforce these, but you can't. You don't have any right to do that. Yeah. Yeah. So just ignore those. That's the whole reason zoning was created. The whole reason zoning was created because the deed restriction system didn't work. I mean, originally that's how they tried to control property, was through deed restrictions, but they didn't work, and so that's why the whole zoning thing was invented, was so that the municipality would have a way of enforcing these things. Yeah.
They may consider a moratorium until they get their subdivision law.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do that. Yep. Yep. And subdivision law is a fairly easy law to adopt, actually. I mean, it's not like a zoning law where you have to go through county referral and, it's not complicated. It's a simple local law, actually. You could do it fairly quickly if you wanted to. And the commission has a model that you could look. I think I actually shared it with you, didn't I? Yeah.
And in Ben's situation, with one road going in there,
if they abandoned the road, okay, at that point, that land is basically landlocked, right?
Well, there's no way to abandon it now.
No, he said that it was.
Oh, that the land was abandoned, or that the
road was abandoned.
Yeah. Well, there's
So
still
there was no-
there's not land. It's not landlocked. It's not. If there was a road there and it's been abandoned, there's probably still a private easement of access to the properties, which is different than a public easement of access.
He said it was a county.
It was a town road, and
Yeah.
in the state of New York bought a very large tract of land behind it. And the state of New York DEC recognized that road as public access to public state land. So even though the town abandoned it, you actually had...
I'm thinking that was probably qualified abandoned to them. I don't know. You should look into that. You have to look into the status of what happened on
And
that.
so
Yeah.
Christmas was using, because I've talked to Christmas about it, Christmas was using their mindset, their lawyer mindset, was that because that is a state access road for the public to access state land, even though the town says we're not owning it, we're not maintaining it, it is still a public right-of-way. And that was their lawyer mindset, was that it's still a public access, so it's a public road. And the town is like, well, we're not gonna maintain it. Like Rob Grogan, our highway superintendent, says in all the years I've been working for the town, I've never put so much as a pickup truck on that road. But now all of a sudden, we've got 10, 20 acre lots.
Well,
Oh yeah, this ain't, and they're getting together.
yeah.
Yeah, it's the other side of Booty Hill, it's up on Bethel Road up there. This is, we're not talking small change here, guys.
Yep.
This is a big deal.
Phil, it's my understanding that if you lost an argument like this and had to develop a road, you only need to develop a portion of it, come up with a plan, it might be a 5, 6, 7-year plan to do the road. You don't have to do it all at once.
I'm.
That's what Mark Gibo told
Well,
me.
you could assert that for sure. I mean, if I was a town, I'd say that. Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know. I've never seen any statute or case law that ever dealt with that. So I don't know.
So that
But-
raises one more question. We got a lot of problems in Steuben because we lived in it for a long time, but it's a good example. Back years ago, we had a lonesome fella that found a couple acre lot up in the middle of the state land up on Penn Mountain. And this fella was a very smart man, not a lot of education, but very smart. But he built a cabin up on this property, up in the middle of Penn Mountain State Forest, behind my farm up on the hill. And then he asked the town to open up the road because he had a couple children that were going to go to school. And the town, of course, said no. So this fella, with not a lot of education, he ended up taking the town of Steuben to court, and he won. And the town of Steuben had to open up the road from the French Road Church right across from Evans Tractor Company, back up a little ways, all the way up on the top of Penn Mountain and right down to his residence. Built it to standards so the town could plow it and a school bus could go up there and turn around in the middle of the state forest land. And now the problem we're having, us on the planning board, me, Les, and Dana. I'm gonna say Dwayne, Dana. A new fella, Dana, excuse me. The problem we're faced with is, if these people at Christmas and Associates hear about the precedents that this fella set, couldn't a lawyer just walk in and go, you guys already set precedent, you lost a case on this situation, here we are here.
I don't think you have to worry about precedent because each road situation is unique. Every situation like this, to determine whether something is a town road or not, depends on the actual facts of the case of that particular road. So, you know what I mean? You can have a completely different situation with another road in town that would come out a completely different way.
Well, first of all, insurance ain't gonna give them, if they build houses and it ain't built to standard, insurance companies not, if they have no fire protection, they're not gonna be able to get insurance for the home.
Well, there's that issue too. Yeah. Any more questions?
You really asking that?
All right, we'll say call it a night.